So, with the release of Inside Out 2, I thought it was just about time to go through and rank and talk about every single Pixar movie ever, telling you guys which ones I think are the best and which ones I think are not very good. Because Pixar is a brand and a studio that has been a very large part of my life. My childhood was made up of watching these movies dozens and dozens of times, literally every day. I would annoy my parents, begging them to let me watch the VHS tape of Finding Nemo. If you don't know what a VHS tape is, that means you are younger than me. And I'm not that old, I don't think. But Pixar has been making movies for like 30, 40 years at this point. They're one of, if not the best animation studio alive. Their only drawback is the fact that they're owned by Disney, the worst company in Hollywood. But they, at the moment, are still Disney's golden goose, this one company that just keeps producing great box office hits and great films for them, and Disney has yet to ruin them despite them trying, but so far it hasn't happened. So today we're going to go through on a tier list. You can see here, I got the tier list up. You know how these videos work. I'm going to go from the first movie they ever made all the way up to Inside Out 2. We're going to fill out this list in order of best to worst. If you don't know what tier lists are at this point, congratulations. You, sir or ma'am, do not have brain rot. You stay off the internet, and I am happy for you. Before I get into it, please make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, turn on notifications. I upload every single day videos like this, literally every day. Between long form and shorts, you get so much content here. I make videos on movies, TV shows, video games, books. If you're into any of that stuff, I talk about it all here. I also talk about my own stuff. I make films, I also write. I'm writing a novel very, very soon, and I make content on all of that. So if you're somebody who might be interested in that, please stick around. I don't want your money, I don't want anything else. I just would like your time every now and then. That would be nice for me. That makes me want to make these videos more. So please, stick around for some more. Let's jump right into it.
You've got a friend in me.
The original Toy Story, which released in 1995, is one of the most classic animated movies in the history of the genre. It's a film with a very simple concept. What happens to your toys when you leave them in your room alone, when you're not home? Well, they come to life, and they get up to a bunch of nonsense. The first Toy Story movie is an absolute classic that has extremely strong themes that connect not only to its targeted child audience, but to a more adult audience. This is a movie that has aged particularly well, at least for me. The story of Woody, who is kind of the leader of these toys, and the favorite toy of Andy, and this whole ensemble of characters that are just so exciting. And Woody, voiced brilliantly by Tom Hanks, is just a classic character, and then you bring in Buzz Lightyear, another classic character, voiced just as well by Tim Allen, and the camaraderie that they have in this movie, this relationship of Woody feeling like he's being replaced, no longer being the favorite, and then kind of having to come together throughout the film is just really marvelous. This film has some of the best set pieces that I've seen in an animated film. Set pieces that are just engraved in my head, like the claw. Something about the claw in Planet Pizza. It just hypnotized me as a kid. I always wanted to eat in Planet Pizza. This film also introduced some other iconic characters like Ham, like Rex, characters that are still hilarious to this day. The animation here, does it look a little bit old? Yeah, but I still think it holds up relatively fine in the grand scheme of things. There are worse animated movies like that have come out in recent years that look worse than this. But overall, this is a marvelous film, a great soundtrack, the beautiful ending, and just one of the best animated movies ever. So because of that, we're taking Toy Story 1, and that goes right in S tier. Of course, it belongs in S tier. It deserves to be in S tier. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of S tiers in this video, but we'll see.
He was full of confidence.
A Bug's Life, I feel like, is the forgotten Pixar film. I feel like nobody talks about this movie, but it's one that I've seen a billion times, and I also loved as a kid. Releasing in 1998, the second film from Pixar Studios takes place in an ant colony. A very simple concept similar to Toy Story. We just follow these ants as they try to be ants. Because who doesn't want to see inside the life of these ants? They're such fascinating creatures that get stepped on a lot. We follow Flick, who's this member of the ant colony who's just constantly screwing things up, and he goes on his own adventure that leads them into like this weird conflict with grasshoppers and a bunch of other nonsense. This movie is just another fun adventure that takes place in this fantasy, magical Pixar world of an ant colony, which is weird to say the word fantasy because it's not like Lord of the Rings fantasy, but it's just kind of like a fairy tale type feeling, which is what Disney, and now Pixar, is kind of famous for, kind of taking you out of our world and engulfing you and immersing you within the world of the characters they're telling you. I will say the characters here and the film itself is a little more forgettable than many of the other Pixar movies, but this is still a movie that I'll turn on any day of the week and I will have a really, really good time with. I just don't think it's in that same tier of other movies that are going to be on this list. So I'll put A Bug's Life in B tier. In 1999, we had the follow-up to Toy Story 1, of course, called Toy Story 2. Probably the fastest Pixar ever made a sequel. It's crazy. Toy Story 2 is another classic, which brings back all the characters we love. We have Woody, we have Buzz, we have Rex. They are all back here, and we have another adventure where Woody and all the characters are getting up to some shenanigans. In this film, Woody is stolen from home. He's brought and becomes a member of this collector's collection, and all the other characters have to go and get him out. We have a great adventure that has some more incredible set pieces that were just imprinted on my mind, like the gigantic grocery store and the whole section with Buzz seeing all the other Buzz Lightyears, Wheezy, and all that stuff. Freaked me out as a kid. The whole airport sequence at the end of this movie, these are just things that I feel like I've seen a billion times. Because I have seen a billion times. It's a movie that is just so a part of me that I can't help but to love every second of it. This movie is incredibly emotional, I think, with this kind of discovery of who you are as a person, with Woody being this collector's item and feeling very important, and Buzz realizing that he's maybe not very important, but kind of identifying what importance is to yourself and where you find that in your own personality. It's a really great movie. It's got a really emotional conclusion, and it's just one of the better Pixar films. But I think it's a little bit worse than some of the other films I'm going to be putting in S tier in this video. I'm just not sure it lives up to some of them, so I'm going to put Toy Story 2 in A tier. Then we got Monsters, Inc. My god, do I love me Monsters, Inc. This might have been my favorite movie as a kid. It's at least one of them. Monsters, Inc., which came out in 2001, the same year that I came out. Isn't that incredible? It's where Pixar took you and immersed you into this new world full of monsters. This world of monsters that are very much like humans. They're just kind of like normal people. They're normal dudes. But they need energy. They need power. So how do they get their energy? Well, they're not using oil. They're not using, like, coal mining or whatever. No, they are going into the human world and scaring kids and using their screams for energy. What a fascinating concept. So because of that, they have an industry of scarers, a bunch of monsters that have to go and scare people. And that's where we get introduced to Sully and Mike Wazowski, both brilliantly voiced by their respected actors. And you get this great big conspiracy of a film of a bunch of different shenanigans going on at this company. You get a little girl named Boo who comes and steals the hearts of the monsters and the audience. This is another film that just kind of feels like a dream. It feels like a fairy tale. There are set pieces in this movie that are yet again imprinted on my mind, like the big chase sequence through the doors near the end of the movie, and Boo, like, almost getting crushed by machinery, and Sully just going, you know what I'm talking about. Come on, we all love Pixar. Steve Buscemi voicing the bad guy. It's all just brilliant, guys. It's all just amazing. Monsters, Inc. is S tier. I'm gonna put it behind Toy Story. I think Toy Story is a little bit better, but easy S tier. Then in 2003, we had Finding Nemo, and my god, Pixar, what is it that Seamus says all the time?
Banger after banger after banger.
Finding Nemo is another just absolute classic from my childhood, a movie that I've seen hundreds of times. What is Finding Nemo? It's a story about a bunch of fish who are smart and they talk, and the dad loses his kid and he has to go find his kid. Very simple, very beautiful, very engaging. And what happens on this journey? He meets this other blue little fish, voiced by Ellen DeGeneres, who is not a nice person. But that's okay, because Dory is a nice person, and she swims. She just keeps swimming, and it's one of the greatest lines in cinema. And through this journey, him and Dory kind of build this friendship, this camaraderie, and you kind of learn what friendship is, and he finds his son later in the movie, and the journey of finding his son feels like a fight. There are so many incredible characters in this movie. Not just Nemo, not just Marlin, not just Dory, but you also have Crush, who's so iconic. He has his own, like, ride experience thing at Disney. You have, like, the birds, the seagull things, that are just terrifying. They scared the shit out of me as a kid. As well as getting, like, flushed down a toilet. When I used to have goldfish as a child, I never wanted to flush them down the toilet because of this movie. When they died, I said, we're not flushing them down the toilet because of Finding Nemo. That movie told me not to do that because it's really scary. This is a brilliant movie. It's a perfect movie. Finding Nemo is also going in S tier. I'm going to put it in front of Monsters, Inc., but behind Toy Story. The Incredibles, my god. I don't think there's any studio in Hollywood that has ever had a stretch that Pixar had in this early 2000s period when they first opened their studio. This is incredible. It's just classic after classic. The Incredibles is a fantastic movie. And with the word fantastic, it's essentially a retelling of a Fantastic Four type story where instead of it being kind of these somewhat family members, somewhat lovers, you know, like the regular Fantastic Four, where they're not all related, we have the situation where it is a family that lives in this very interesting superhero world, a world where superheroes have sort of been outlawed, but the parents of these two kids are like the best superheroes from the previous time. And there's a big conspiracy about superheroes being hunted down and a bunch of other stuff, and this is just an incredible movie. The world here is so unique, and the art style and the animation is so beautiful and so iconic, and you can immediately tell by seeing one image from this movie that yes, that is The Incredibles. It's one of the more interesting takes on superheroes, something that even in today's world where we've gotten a bunch of superhero movies, I'm not really sure there's anything like The Incredibles out there. All the characters here all stand out and they play off of each other extremely well. Bob, aka Mr. Incredible, is so unique and funny and hilarious. His wife, voiced by the incredibly underrated Holly Hunter, is also really awesome. Such a great character here. The two kids, Violet and Dash, both play off each other as a typical sibling relationship. The villain here is done really well. Sam Jackson is in this movie and he's perfect. This movie is so iconic from start to finish, and the worst thing about it is that they took so long to make a sequel. Now they're taking a very long time to make the threequel. The Incredibles is simply incredible. I'm the first person to ever say that. I'm taking credit. We're putting The Incredibles in S tier. I'm gonna put it in the bottom of S tier. I think I like Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo a little bit better. And Toy Story, of course. I'm American made, but large Chevrolet. 2006, we have Cars. Now this is where Pixar started getting into a little bit of their chicanery. Now Cars is not a bad movie. I'm not saying that. It's not going to be an S tier, though. Cars takes place in a world with cars, and the cars are smart, and they're like us, and they live in our society. And we follow Lightning, what's his last name?
McQueen.
Lightning McQueen, who goes off, and he's this big race car driver, and he ends up getting lost in this town and getting kind of wrecked, and he has to figure out his shit and come back and become a big racer. I know, what a brilliant synopsis I just gave of this movie. Now, what's wrong with Cars? Not much. This is a really great movie. It's another movie that kind of immerses you in the world that Pixar's trying to build here. All the characters are really likable and fun and iconic, like Lightning McQueen himself. Of course, Mater, voiced by Larry the Cable Guy. All the characters here are done extremely well. They play off each other well enough. There's just something about this movie that doesn't feel as magical as the previous ones. It's not as rewatchable, and I think the story maybe is a little more predictable or a little more suited to children without leaving in some themes for the older folks. Maybe? I don't really know. It's been a while since I've rewatched this movie, but it's one that I just never really connected with as I had the previous however many Pixar movies. But it's still a really good movie that I think it has a good conclusion. It's got a very good story. It's written well, and I enjoy this movie. So we're gonna put Cars in the back of B tier. Then you have Ratatouille. I'm about to get some shit for this one. I've seen Ratatouille less than any of the classic Pixar movies. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's, I don't know, my parents' fault for never putting the movie on. I don't know. I understand this is most people's favorite Pixar movie. Most people put either this or another movie that we'll talk about later as number one. For me, neither one of them will be number one. This is a movie that I have loved every time I've watched it. It's a very unique story about this rat who helps this dude cook, and it's such a fascinating world built here, taking place in Paris, centering around food and all this unique art style that this movie has. The animation here is stunning for how early in the 2000s it was made. It's a really beautiful story about friendship, about, you know, cooking, and I don't know, I just haven't seen a lot of it, and I just don't have that same nostalgic value for this movie that I have for many of these other ones. But Ratatouille is amazing. So we're gonna put Ratatouille in the back of A tier.
There's a world outside of Yonkers, way out there.
WALLE is the other film that everybody usually puts at number one. I will not be putting it number one because I also have seen this movie less than others, but I will say this is one of the more fascinating Pixar films. It's one that took a big risk and tried doing something extremely different than many of the other ones by telling a very, very sort of isolating story. This is an A24 movie built in the Pixar. WALLE is about, well, this robot WALL-E, who lives in this world where Earth has been pretty much completely destroyed. Humans have left Earth to go be fat people in space, and now WALL-E is on Earth and just messing around, and he kind of falls in love, and a bunch of other stuff happens. This is a very quiet movie, but a very engaging movie, one that really immerses you in the world, and I keep using that word immersion. It's because I can't think of any other word right now. But that's really what Pixar does best. They immerse you in these fairy tale type worlds, whether they take place in the future, the past, the present. You feel like you're living there, and that's when these movies are the best, is when you feel like you're right there with the characters, but it's so unfamiliar to your world that you shouldn't feel as comfortable as you do. But WALL-E's one of those movies that accomplishes it. You feel comfortable living in this kind of gross, disgusting, yet beautiful world with this character who's so innocent, but you just can't help but love. It's a brilliant movie. It's just a movie that I haven't seen as many times as the other ones, and I don't enjoy it as much as some of the I don't go back to this one as much as I go back to many of the other films on this list. But because I don't want to get shit on too much, I'll put it in A tier. I'll put it right in front of Ratatouille. If I could rank the first 10 minutes of Up, this will be number 1 in S tier. It's the greatest opening to a movie ever. I think we can all agree on that. It's the opening that made every single one of us cry the first times we watch it. It makes every single one of us cry the 150th time we watch it. It is such a brilliant opening that captures exactly what aging probably feels like. I mean, I'm not that old yet, but from my experience in aging, the little bit I've done of it, yeah, it sucks. But not just aging, but falling in love and eventually losing the things you love, losing the purpose of life that you had. Then the movie transforms into another sort of adventure, a weird Indiana Jones-esque thing where this man with his house that has a bunch of balloons on it and this little boy who's a Boy Scout fly off into this weird tropical land that is only known by myth. And there they get up to a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of things go on that are very, very much less interesting than the opening of this film. The biggest thing I always hear about this film is the opening is great, the rest of the film sucks. I won't say the rest of the film sucks, but the rest of the film definitely drags down the film because it is not as engaging. There's a lot of great stuff. I think the third act of this film is brilliant. I think the dog is hilarious. But yeah, Up is gonna be right in front of Cars and B tier. Toy Story 3. Gonna get it right out of the way early. This is my favorite Pixar movie. This film crushed me as a kid. You have to understand, this movie came out in 2010. I was 9 years old, and I was brought to the movie theater to see this movie as a 9-year-old, having seen all of these other movies a billion times. Now, I don't remember many things from when I was 9. I don't remember much at all. But I remember this experience watching this film. Being so excited to see my favorite guys, Woody, Buzz, all these characters come together one last time for a perfect finale that should have been the finale. And the movie made me cry then. And now as a 22-year-old, soon to be 23-year-old, who is at that same kind of point in life that Andy was, in fact, I'm a little bit older, this movie still makes me cry because it is crushing. This kind of releasing your childhood, letting go of the things you love. It's kind of like me now letting go of the love I had for Pixar movies. I'll never do it. I'll never let go of it. This is a brilliant movie, though, about Woody and all the characters having to adapt to this new environment they're at this weird daycare center, and a bunch of stuff that goes on there, which eventually leads to the great furnace scene. My God, how did they show that to kids? But this movie is just so entertaining from start to finish. All the characters get a moment to shine. They all have great arcs in here. The daycare center is iconic. All the stuff that goes on there is iconic. The third act of this film is brilliant, and the ending is one of, if not the best ending of any childhood movie I have ever seen. It is so good, so impactful, and it's going to be a movie that I show my kids because do I want to see them cry? Maybe I won't show it to my kids. That's kind of fucked up. This movie is damaging to the childhood experience. It's gonna make them miserable. I will show them to my kids when they're 20 or when they're 9. I don't know. We'll see. Toy Story 3 is going at the top of S tier. It is going to stay there as well. And Pixar followed up their best movie ever with maybe their worst movie ever. Cars 2 is a mess. It's a movie that has a lot of good ideas, but just kind of ends up feeling half-cooked and uninspired compared to the rest of the Pixar film. Granted, this is the first time Pixar attempted to do a sequel outside of the Toy Story universe, and it kind of becomes a trend, as you'll see on this list, that I do think a lot of the sequels, non-Toy Story sequels, kind of fall flat a little bit compared to their original. Cars 2 is about a movie where Lightning McQueen and Mater and all the whole crew, they go around the world to do this, like, worldwide race, and it's a movie that just ends up being really boring, uninspired, and less magical than the original one. It kind of lost its sense of fun, its loss of discovery, which is yet again another trend you'll see in some of these sequels. It's a movie that I just don't rewatch a lot, and I think it might be the worst Pixar movie. I'm gonna put it in D tier. I don't know if it's F. I don't think there's any movie here that's gonna be an F. In 2012, we got Brave, aka the Becky Lynch movie. And maybe the most forgettable Pixar movie. I don't remember anything from this film, and I was dreading the idea of rewatching it for this video. So I didn't. It's about an Irish chick, and a bunch of stuff happens. She goes on an adventure. She's like a badass warrior, I think. And yeah, it's boring. We'll put Brave also in D tier, right ahead of Cars 2. I think it's better than Cars 2, right? Sorry, all you Brave fans that I just pissed off. If you're out there. In 2013, we got Monsters University, and I just cringed realizing that this movie's 11 years old, because I feel like I just saw it. It's the long-awaited sequel to Monsters, Inc., except it's not a sequel, it's a prequel, which I actually think was a fascinating route to go with this world, because what do you realistically do with a sequel? A prequel, you could do more interesting things, like show you the school side of monster scaring. And this is a movie that I like more than most people. I think this movie is so much fun and is a proper prequel to the original. Everyone from the original movie's back, and just the characters are so much better. Everyone from the original movie is back, and I think the characters still remain to be the characters that we love from the original, despite there's a sense of immaturity to some of them, a sense of, youngness to them, with Sully being this immature kind of douchebag, and Mike Wazowski being this kind of know-it-all nerd, and how they kind of contrast each other in this world. And they go through this big scaring competition, so Mike Wazowski can get back into the scare program, and a bunch of stuff going on there. And I think the adventure and the journey through this film is interesting. I think the competition is a lot of fun. Is this one as good as the original one? Obviously no. But it's a movie that I think captured exactly what I wanted from a continuation of the Monsters universe. It brought me back to that world, which I found so interesting to begin with, let me enjoy these characters some more, and gave me some new, fascinating things in the world building here to just grit my teeth into. Monsters University is going in B tier. I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. The original Inside Out. Also cringing as I just found out this is 9 years old. Wow. This is another absolute classic of a film. The first film in a while that Pixar actually decided to do something incredibly unique and try to take a big risk on a high concept idea with beautiful animation, great characters, and just something that both young kids and older audiences will grip onto. Now, how do you do that? Well, you make a film about the emotions in our brain and how the emotions kind of fight and tangle with each other, and you make it a meta commentary on the experience of living. This movie's brilliant. It's hilarious. Everybody in this movie is extremely well voiced. This is a movie that if I had seen as a little kid, it probably would have been one of my favorite movies ever. Seeing it as a teenager, it is still one of the best movies ever. The movie's hilarious, it's dark at times, it's sad, it's extremely smart in how it becomes meta at points. And yeah, it's a really brilliant movie. Of course, Inside Out, it's going in S tier. The Good Dinosaur is another movie that I just don't remember a lot about. I remember a lot of people hating this when it came out. I remember enjoying it enough, but this is still one of the weaker Pixar movies. It takes place 65 million years ago. It's about a dinosaur who, brings around this little human boy, and they go on adventures, and a lot of stuff happens. A lot of stuff that I just don't remember. But I just know this was not one of my favorite Pixar movies when I watch it. It's also not one of my least favorite. So what does that mean? That means The Good Dinosaur goes in C tier. It is the only movie there. Congratulations, Good Dinosaur. You have your own tier. Finding Dory was the long-awaited sequel to Finding Nemo, a movie that I honestly didn't think we'd ever actually see, and a movie that now that we have seen it, it's so weird how forgettable it is for some reason. Finding Dory is a really good sequel. It's a really good movie that focuses on Dory, who gets lost in this aquarium, and all the characters here, including Marvin and Nemo, have to go save her. You get a bunch of new characters who are all fascinating and hilarious. You get Crush, who comes back, a bunch of other characters like the squid thing. This movie's a lot of fun. It has a great ending. I think the What a Wonderful World scene is just remarkable. It's just a film that I, for some reason, forget about. I forget a lot of what happens in this movie, and then I remember it, and I go, wow, I did enjoy that. Finding Dory is gonna go at the top of B tier, right in front of Monsters University. I think it's a little bit better. Cars 3 is the film that, I remember when they released that first trailer, everybody just collectively went, holy shit. That first trailer was brilliant, and better than the movie. But the movie's still pretty good. This is the second threequel that they've made after Toy Story 3, and I think it's the second best one. So congrats, Pixar. This movie tells a story of an aging athlete, essentially. What do you do when the wheels are literally falling off and you have to adapt to this new world or retire? And we see Lightning McQueen as he's going through kind of those years of his career. And because of that, it's a story that's very easy to connect to. That's the kind of story you want to see. Sort of an underdog story, but at a different part of a career. Following a person who has already won everything, but is now slagging behind because of age, but still wants to compete with the new young gun. This movie works a lot, I think. There's a lot of stuff about this movie that's forgettable and that I find really boring and that I don't really want to go back and rewatch, but this movie still is interesting. If you love the Cars movies, I think this is probably your favorite Cars movie. For me, I think it's in B tier. I will put it ahead of Up. No. I'll put it right ahead in front of Cars. I don't think it's better than Up or A Bug's Life or any of this stuff.
I have to say goodbye. Remember me.
Also in 2017, they released Coco, a movie they named after my dog. How nice of them. Coco is a brilliant movie about this boy who heads into the land of the dead. A land that is so beautifully animated. This is the best animated movie that Pixar has made. The animation here is so gorgeous. It is stunning. It is the best looking film in this whole saga of movies. And then the story here is so rich. It's so rich with culture of Mexico and a lot of the stuff that goes on there with the Day of the Dead and kind of that Latin style holiday. But also the music, the way the characters relate to each other family-wise, and just a bunch of the stuff that happens in this movie. You could feel the culture oozing from it, which is always so great. The music in this movie is beautiful. The story here is stunning and emotional and gripping and devastating when it needs to be. This movie is fabulous, it's fantastic, and it's one of the best things Pixar has done in recent years. It is a movie that I could talk about for hours, but I'm only going to talk about for a little bit because I don't want this video to be hours long. So Coco will go in S tier, but where does it go? It's better than Inside Out, better than The Incredibles, it's better than Monsters, Inc., And I think that's where we'll leave it. I don't think it's better than Finding Nemo. Incredibles 2, another sequel that took forever to happen, and now that it has happened, it is also strangely forgettable for some reason. Does that mean it's strangely bad? No, I love The Incredibles 2. It's a great continuation of the story that picks up right where the first one ended. We follow the family as they have now exposed themselves as new heroes, and they kind of have to go and be careful now, I guess. But they get recruited by Saul Goodman, who takes Mrs. Incredible and makes her kind of like the face of this new hero generation, and Bob has to go and be a dad. And it's just a fun movie about being parents and being superheroes in this ever-changing world. I think the third act of this movie gets a little convoluted and kind of conjointed, and I feel like there's aspects of this movie that don't feel as magical or as special as the original movie. I feel like the animation and the look of this film feels more like a Disney Plus version of The Incredibles versus The Incredibles, so it kind of lost some of the magic that the first film had, but it's still a very entertaining film, a very good film, one that I go back and watch every now and then. Incredibles 2 will go in B tier. I will put it at the top of B tier, right behind Finding Dory. Toy Story 4 is a movie that I feel like should have never been made. I think the fact that it was made was kind of, I don't want to say a mistake, but it's something that was done clearly in the eyes of Disney, this kind of model of filmmaking that they have where it's just to maximize profit. So why make a Toy Story 4? Well, because we've made 3 of them and they were all super successful, so of course, a 4th one will also be financially successful. Completely ignoring the fact that the entire purpose of Toy Story 3 was to wrap up the story, and they wrapped it up in the best possible way that you can imagine. So what is Toy Story 4? Well, it's a story that revives the characters, and it revives a lot of the arcs that were alive during Toy Story 3 and finished off, and they brought them all back to try to yet again bring the story to a conclusion. A conclusion that was already met in the previous one. Now, because I disagree with the actual existence of this film and the fact that it is a rehash of the previous conclusion, does that mean that I dislike this movie? No, Toy Story 4 is still a fantastic film. It brings back all the characters we love, it introduces new characters, specifically Keanu Reeves, who's so good in this movie, as Duke Kaboom. I love Keanu Reeves. This movie is beautifully animated, easily the best animated Toy Story movie we've gotten, and it's very different than the other 3 films and where the film takes place and a lot of the adventures that were going on with other new characters like Forky. The ending of this movie is very emotional, but not as emotional as it would have been if Toy Story 3 didn't exist. Because Toy Story 3 exists, the ending of this movie just kind of falls flat, because you feel like you've already been through this with these characters. I think the existence of this movie is really unfortunate. I think the fact that they're making Toy Story 5 is really unfortunate. I think they should listen to the ending of Toy Story 3. Let go. Let go.
No, you're still holding on! Let go!
I'm gonna put Toy Story 4 in the middle of B tier. We'll put it right in front of A Bug's Life. Fun story, Onward was the last movie I saw before COVID happened. I saw it about a week before the pandemic happened. Last film I had on my mind going into 8 months of no film. And I love Onward. I think Onward is really great. It's a fun story starring Tom Holland and Chris Pratt. They exist in kind of this actual fantasy fairy tale type world of elves and orcs and all that good stuff. And this brother is on this kind of fetch quest trying to become the greatest wizard or whatever. It's a big magical movie about these brothers that just want to spend more time with their father who had died. And there's this big quest that follows kind of like the fantasy tropes that you expect that works really well. This is another movie that I think is beautifully animated. It's got a world that you just like to be in, you like to exist in. I think it's really unique. And I think the story here is really easy to grip onto. I found the story and the relationship between these 2 brothers and their actual goal here to be easy to understand and easy to love. I love the characters in this film, and that's what makes it work so brilliantly. This is a film that I feel like people didn't talk about enough because it came out right before COVID, and it's a film that I wish was talked about more in the grand scheme of Pixar film. I think Onward is A tier. I'm gonna put it at the bottom of A tier. And we have Soul, which unfortunately came out in the height of COVID, so it was a movie that none of us really got to experience in movie theaters. We had to watch at home on Disney+. That did not stop it from still being one of the better films they've made in quite a while. The film follows this middle school teacher who loves jazz, he loves music, and he ends up kind of falling into this weird world, this weird realm of existence that Pixar yet again immerses you in. A world that is very interesting and fascinating and has a bunch of quirks and meta aspects to it that keep you engaged in the story. The character of Joe is so charming and so whimsical that you just can't help but love him, and all the other supporting characters in this movie also are very fun to watch. This movie is also beautifully animated. It's one of the best looking films that Pixar has made. It's a film that was incredibly successful when it came out, and people were very happy to have a film like this during the height of COVID. It's another film that feels very much cultured like Coco was. It just oozes the culture of where it takes place and what the story is trying to say. I think the jazz music is beautiful. There's just a lot I love about this movie. We're gonna also put Soul in A tier. I'm gonna put it in front of Onward, yeah. Luca's another film that came out during the height of COVID, a film that I never got to see in theaters, and because of that, I think its actual experience, the experience of viewing this film, suffered. Whereas Soul, I still had a fantastic time watching it at home. Luca's a film that I think I would have loved a lot more if I had gotten to see it in a movie theater. This is a film that should have spoken to me directly, because I am Italian, and I am a young man, and who had gone through a coming-of-age type story like a decade ago, but for some reason I just couldn't connect with this one. There's another one that definitely oozes culture yet again, the culture of Italy, Italians. Me, I'm Italian. He's Italian, Mr. Scorsese. I doubt he watched this movie. I love the characters here, I like the voice acting. It's a movie that is solid and I enjoyed watching, but it's one that just ended up being kind of forgettable in the grand scheme of Disney stuff, in the grand scheme of Pixar stuff, in the grand scheme of COVID. It's another movie that because it came out in a time that we all kind of wanted to forget, we forgot it. I will put Luca, we will put it ahead of the Cars movies, but below everything else in B tier. Then you have Turning Red, which is a less than subtle coming-of-age movie compared to something like Inside Out or compared to Luca. This is a very on-the-nose type movie when it comes to coming of age. And that's something I appreciate about it. I appreciate how just out there this movie is with its concept. It's a movie about a girl who's going through puberty, and because of that, she turns into this big, gigantic red monster. Now, there's a lot more to it than just that. It's another movie that, yes, is very much enriched in its own culture, which I like a lot. It makes the movie have its own sort of life compared to anything else that Pixar's done. And I think this story, although one of their films that is most definitely not made for me, it's made for a very specific audience, it's still a movie that I think is extremely well made, and I appreciated the hell of, because it also came out during COVID, and I enjoyed watching it. I wish this came out in movie theaters, I would have liked it a lot more, but it's still a movie that I think is really, really good. I think if you are a young girl, this is probably your favorite movie of 2022. I think it was good for families. Just a good movie. Turning Red will also be in B tier. I'm gonna put it, I'll put it right in front of Luca. I don't think it's better than any of these. Then you have Lightyear, which for some reason was like the most controversial Pixar movie of all time because of that one scene where two chicks kissed for some reason. And people got very upset about that for some reason. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even notice it happened in the movie, and even if I did, it has no bearing on the plot. Now, I'm all here for saying that stuff being forced down our kids' throat, forcing these kind of culture changes down our kids' throat is wrong. I agree with that. But yet again, it was just really dumb, the controversy around this movie. This is a movie that everybody hated. It's a weird kind of spin-off to Toy Story. It's a movie about Buzz Lightyear, but not the Buzz Lightyear we know, but the movie Buzz Lightyear that exists within the Toy Story universe. Now, that's a concept that I actually dig. I think that is a really cool idea, something that you could have done with all the Toy Story characters if you really wanted to. Chris Evans takes over as Buzz Lightyear, and he fits into this role like a perfect new pair of sneakers. It is just beautiful. He is so well done in this character. He feels like he's been voicing the character all his life. I love his performance here. It's not Tim Allen, but it's definitely great. Taika Waititi voices a character in this movie. I just wanted to say Taika Waititi's name. I love saying his name. The ensemble of characters here are definitely the weakest part. The characters here are very much forgettable, but Buzz Lightyear is still an interesting character. I think the first 30 minutes of this movie are brilliant. This whole idea of the passing of time and Buzz trying to save the civilization. I think the idea of where the story goes and the themes and how it wraps up, the message of it, is also really smart and engaging, and I thought the script here with the story they were trying to tell was a lot of fun and definitely impactful. I just think the middle part of this movie drags a bit. I think a lot of the action and the stuff that happens with the characters in that middle section is super, super forgettable. The world is kind of ugly, and it's probably the one world that Pixar has ever made where I'm like, I do not want to spend another second in that world. It is just gross and hard to look at, but this movie is not terrible. I, in fact, think it's fine. So fine, in fact, I'm going to put it in C tier, the front of C tier. Sorry, Good Dinosaur, you no longer have your own tier.
And darling, let me know.
Elemental is a movie that I feel like should have been so much better than it is because it is another high concept type movie that Pixar was doing. A movie that should have had a concept that really engaged itself with audiences. It's really cool. Set in this weird universe where all the characters are different elements. Fire, earth, water, etc. And these characters have to learn to kind of get along with each other. That mends itself well to being a story that can be very culturally, appropriate. A story that is very obvious in what it's trying to say about our world, but still communicating very good messages to the younger audience. It could have been all those things, and at times it tries to be those things, but it just ends up being kind of boring and forgettable and just kind of the standard. This movie is kind of a love story at its core, which is something a little unique to Pixar, and I definitely appreciated that, but it's a film that I just have not gone back and rewatched ever since that first viewing, and I don't think I will. It's just kind of a forgettable, little bit of a boring Pixar movie. I don't know. I'm gonna put Elemental in D tier, to be honest. I'm just not the biggest fan of it. I think it's better than Brave and Cars 2, but I don't think it's better than any of these things. And then we have Inside Out 2, which is a film that I just saw, and if you saw my review, you know that I'm indifferent about it. It's a film that on one hand is very, very good. It is an incredible film that does a lot right, but on the other hand, it's a movie which its best aspects are kind of things that it was just redoing from the first one. Now, the best part of Inside Out 2 are the new emotions, anxiety, envy, all brilliantly voice acted. They are hilarious, and when they are on screen, especially in that first 20 minutes, the film is so good. But this film has a very, very weak second act because it just kind of retreads a lot of the stuff that was done in the first movie, kind of reincorporating what I've said about the other sequels in this whole, Pixar universe, where some of the sequels kind of unable to acquire their own identity away from that first film, and they lost sort of the magic of discovery that Pixar is so good at delivering with their movies. Inside Out 2, I think, suffers that to a certain extent. I do think the first act is brilliant. I think the last act are brilliant. I think the characters here are all funny, hilarious. They all work well together. I think the overload of characters here sometimes makes the movie exhausting to kind of get a little bit of each character without some of them feeling like they're being underutilized, unlike the first one. I just think a lot of the second act stuff where they're just kind of like on this fetch quest trying to go get this MacGuffin to get back, it just all feels way too familiar and not unique enough, and I just wanted to push more towards the finale while watching this. But is it a bad movie? It's nowhere near a bad movie. It's still fantastic. I'm gonna put Inside Out 2 right in front of Turning Red and Luca in B tier. So that's my tier list. As you can see, Pixar is a pretty damn good studio. Only 5 movies that are like, mediocre to not very good. A bunch of movies in B tier, which these are just all really solid 3 out of 5 or above movies. Great A tier movies, and then just all-time classic S tier films. I'm really excited to see what Pixar does next. They just continue pushing the envelope with this world. We know they're making Toy Story 5, which I'm not interested in. That movie, Elio, looks interesting. It looks to be their take on like a weird sci-fi coming-of-age story, so I'm excited for that. And I just hope they keep making unique, original films and less sequels. We don't need as many sequels, except The Incredibles 3, because why not? But I'm excited, you're excited, we all love Pixar. What do you guys think of my list? Let me know down below. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And let me know your rankings. Give me, you don't have to rank all the films unless you're a psychopath and you want to do that. Give me your 5 favorite Pixar movies and maybe your 5 least favorite Pixar movies, and then we could start a debate. You could tell me how dumb I am. How dare you not love WALLE? How dare you put Inside Out 2 in B tier? The Good Dinosaur is my favorite movie of all time. Brave is the greatest Becky Lynch film ever made. You're right. I'm right too. We're all right. It's opinions, guys. But let me know down below. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that jazz. I'll see you guys in the next one.